What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the debut episode of the Angels franchise here on MLB The Show 24. In this episode, we are going to be doing a very big deep dive on the team that we're going to be using this year for franchise. We're also going to be talking about what some of the plans may be for this team this season and beyond, because there are a lot of question marks about this Angels team going into this first season. I'll also talk a little bit about why I selected the Angels as we go through the roster and some of these things, but very excited to get this series going. There are so many question marks with this Angels team going into this 2024 season that we have to get answers to. Now, obviously, the biggest question mark going into the season is what is the future for Mike Trout? Mike Trout has been the best player in the past decade plus, and he is now in his age 32 season. He has already solidified himself as, in my opinion, a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greats that have played this game, but he has only been in one playoff series in his career, and he has never won a playoff game in his career. And so we say all that to say the future for Mike Trout is murky at best right now. Age 32 does tend to be the time, or around the time, that you start to see some of the players really start to decline. We've seen the games from Mike Trout played has declined drastically. 53 in 2020, 36 in 2021, 82 in 2023. Now, I did play 119 in 2022, and hopefully we can get him back to that, because he still had a pretty impressive season overall during that time, and these numbers are even down a little bit for Mike Trout. But this is why it is such a question mark. He is under contract for the next 7 years for $200 million, and so that is going to hinder what we can do as a team, but it's Mike Trout. And so we have decisions to make. He's still one of the best players in the game. He still is great in the field. He's still fast. He can still hit for power, hit for contact, walk, everything you want in a franchise player, Mike Trout is. But does his age match up with the timeline that we are going to be on? Now, in this series, my plan for Mike Trout is to keep him on the roster at least for the first half of the season. I think if we do make a Mike Trout trade, it will probably be closer to the trade deadline in season 1, just so we can see where some of these teams are throughout the league and where we are as well as a team. But there are some risks that come with that, because with the injury history that Mike Trout has had over the past couple of seasons, he could get hurt in that time. But I do want to see what this team looks like with Mike Trout in the number 3 spot in the lineup, hopefully every single day, or at least close to it, and see if that can maybe amplify some of the young players around him as well in this lineup. Other than that, there's not much to really work with at all on this roster. This roster is horrible. I mean, there's a reason why the Angels haven't made the playoffs in a decade, and why Mike Trout's never won a playoff series. They have failed to put teams around him every single year, whether it's been pitching, whether it's been hitting, or whether it has been both. And so this year is certainly no different. They did sign Brandon Drury for the 2023 season. I think he's under, honestly, a pretty team-friendly contract, and so that's a guy that, we can use for this season, but he's going to be a free agent after this year. There's not many building blocks on this team really at all. I think if you're going to talk about the building blocks on this team, everybody's pretty much already in the majors, because they've been so desperate for people to come up and do something. When they had Ohtani last year, they pretty much called up everybody. So you see Zach Neto, Nolan Chanel, hopefully I'm saying that name right, and Logan O'Hoppe. And so those are just 3 of kind of the better prospects that we have, honestly. And they're not really all that, but they still are 24, 23, 22 years old. Reed Detmers is 24 years old as well. He's been in the majors now for 2 seasons and has been solid overall. I think this is going to be a pretty telling season for Reed Detmers, honestly. So I'm excited to see what he does this year. And we're just going to see. We're going to find out about some of these guys. Zach Neto, I am really excited about. I think he shows promise, in particularly in the field. Still has to work on his hitting and getting on base, but the fielding is there. He's still only 23 years old. He has a bright future, but with that, he still has a long way to go. And so you see, other than that, there's not much here. This is not really a farm system to write home about. We're going to have to rebuild this farm system pretty much from scratch and start over, as we're already down to the C potential prospects. So there's really nothing here to work with at all. So how did the Angels get in this predicament that they find themselves in? Because they're a team that is honestly willing to spend money. They are not the Athletics, they're not the Orioles, they're not the Royals. They spent money. And so how did they get here? Well, when you hand out some of the contracts that they have handed out, that is how. You can see the top 4 contracts on this team. 3 of them are players who are below 70 overalls, and Anthony Rendon is probably the worst contract in Major League Baseball right now. He has completely given up playing baseball. He has no interest in playing any longer. His numbers since he joined the Nats have been awful. His first year was putting up good average, but he barely played. He has not played 60 games yet in a season for the Angels. He said during the preseason of this year coming up that he doesn't really like playing baseball and it's just a job for him and he just likes to go home, which honestly I can relate to as someone who has a real job. But you do get to play baseball and make $30 million. You should probably enjoy it a little bit more. And so as we keep this franchise sim, the easy thing to do is to trade Anthony Rendon. And this is where I'm going to need you guys to comment, kind of help me out with some of these situations, because I do want to keep this as realistic as possible. And frankly, no one is going to take on this Anthony Rendon contract. And so we have to figure out what we're going to do with it. For right now, we're going to put him in the MLB roster. We'll see how it goes. I think we might just cut ties with him and eat the contract at this point, because again, no one is going to trade for this contract. Now, if he starts playing well and he's healthy, then maybe, but still probably not. No one's trading for this number. So we have to figure out what we're going to do with Anthony Rendon that is realistic. But for now, he's going to be playing, and we'll see how long he's interested in playing for. They also signed guys like Tyler Anderson from the Dodgers last year, who had a 5.43 ERA and is C potential, 34 years old, is a 69 overall. Does have a 5-pitch mix that's not bad in the game, but I don't assume he's going to be all that. Robert Stevenson, very similar. He's a relief pitcher, 31 years old, deep potential, and he's not very good either. Had actually a pretty good year last year, but yeah, he's not very good. So they're paying $11 million to this guy for the next 3 years, Robert Stevenson. $13 million to Tyler Anderson for the next 2, and then over $30 million for Anthony Rendon for the next 3. So Mike Trout being $35.5 million for the next 7 years is honestly the least of the Angels' concerns and our concerns in this series. I do think that there's a world where we keep Mike Trout and we build around him, but honestly, I do see this team as more of a 2-year, 3-year rebuild. So by that point, Mike Trout would be 34, 35 years old. Now that could change. Some of these young guys really step up for us, but honestly, I don't really see it. I don't know how that's going to work. And so that's why the Mike Trout question mark is so big coming into this season. So this is what the 2024 lineup is looking like right now. We do have Patrick Sandoval, who I actually do like. I actually think that he has potential to be a solid number 2-ish arm in your rotation. So I'm pretty excited for him, actually. We still have 3 more years of MLB service with him as well, so he's under our team control. I think that we're going to keep him around, but never say never on trading pretty much anybody in this series, because this can go so many different ways based on how this team performs and obviously the Trout question mark. The Angels also in the offseason didn't really make any moves. They did add Aaron Hicks in free agency, who had a pretty good year last year after he joined the Orioles. So he's a switch hitting outfielder who can play DH. He can play corner outfield for us or center if Mike Trout gets hurt. And I assume the Angels probably signed him with Trout's injury history, thinking if he's going to be out for a couple weeks, Hicks can step in and won't be terrible. And so that's not a bad contingency plan. You like to always have a decent fourth outfielder out there. And so they do have Aaron Hicks, but they didn't really make any other moves, honestly. I mean, we got Jake Marisnick, but again, none of these are really going to these don't matter. None of these moves matter. They made pretty much no moves in free agency up until this point because, honestly, they don't know the direction of the team. And I don't either, which is exciting. So we talked about Reed Detmers. I'm excited about Reed Detmers. I think that he could be, again, a solid number 2. I think that between him and Patrick Sandoval, honestly, I think we have 2 pretty solid rotational pieces in our rotation. I do not think either of these guys are going to be aces for us in this series, but you never know. But I do think that they're going to be very solid rotational pieces, and so we'll just see how they develop over the course of the series. We also have Chase Silseth, who is just 23 years old. Another one of the guys that the Angels called up very early, who did have a sub-4 ERA last year in 16 appearances, so we'll see how he pitches this year. Griffin Canning, I am not a fan of him really at all, but I am willing to be surprised. And Zach Plesac, who they signed from Cleveland in the offseason, who in 5 appearances last year had a 7.59 ERA, but before that was about a 4.3, 4.6 ERA. Not terrible. He's basically just an innings eater. 131 innings, 142 innings. Like, he can eat some innings if he's healthy. That's pretty much what he did with Cleveland. 2 of his last 3 years there, but we'll see how he does this year and if he can stay on the field. But other than that, you can kind of just see throughout the course of this lineup, there's not really much to it. Again, I think the young guys is who we're going to be kind of looking at. Zach Neto, again, we're going to see what he does. I'll probably try him out a little bit around the lineup, see how he does, maybe batting lead off some games, batting down in the lineup some games. He's a guy we're going to have to play around with. Nolan Chanal's another guy that we will just see. I mean, 96 discipline, 80 contact versus righties. There's definitely something there with him. And he's only 22 years old, left-handed first baseman. I'm cool with that. I'm pretty excited about him, but he got very limited time last year, and we'll just see how he does this year. Honestly, this is a guy who I probably would like to see down in the minors, to be honest with you. And that's decisions we're going to have to make as well on some players because the Angels called up so many of these guys early on because they were so desperate to do anything when they had Ohtani and Trout both together that a lot of these guys got called up before I would have. I would not even have called Zach Neto up when they did last year. So we're going to have to see. I mean, I'm not probably going to send down Neto, but there's a chance that Nolan gets sent down. It's just one of those things that we're going to have to see how they perform. I'm willing to give him a shot. Now that I'm looking at it, I honestly might. I might send him down before opening day. We'll see. He does have minor league options, which is really good. But we'll just kind of see how this goes with him because he does have some tools where he could probably play, but I don't want to hinder his development. And that's what I think they did with a couple of these young guys. And then taking a look at our starting rotation and our bullpen. We just took a look at the rotation a pretty good amount, but looking at the bullpen here, and this bullpen is awful. I mean, there's really no way around it. Matt Moore, not terrible. 34 years old, beat potential left-hander. He's not bad, 79 overall. Could be a decent setup guy for us. I don't know if he's a closer. Probably doesn't really have any plans in our future at all. And quite honestly, if he's having another solid year like he's had the past 2, probably a guy that will look to trade it closer to the trade deadline to a contender who maybe needs another lefty in their bullpen for their playoff push. Pomerantz, another guy who's very similar in the sense that he's really struggled to stay healthy. If he does, he tends to play pretty well, at least for the Padres. But he's another guy that if he's playing solid for us, we'll probably look to flip him for some prospects to a contender. Pretty much everybody in this bullpen who's over the age of 30, we will probably look to flip, as pretty much everybody in this bullpen is over the age of 30. So we'll pretty much try and flip most of, if not all, these guys to contenders for some prospects back at some point in the season. We want to be able to field a competitive team, though, so maybe not everybody, but probably most of them. Now, we do have 2 guys for the prospect promotion incentive list. Nolan Chanel and Logan O'Hoppe are both eligible, but I don't think either of them are going to play well enough to win Rookie of the Year. I mean, it's possible, I guess. Nolan, I doubt. Logan, it's possible, but he's probably not going to hit well enough. But Logan, I'm going to keep up either way. He's going to be our opening day catcher. He's 24 years old, 78 overall. Honestly, he could be a staple back there for us behind the dish for a little bit in this series. So he'll stay up. Nolan, I'm still undecided on, but we do have 2 guys. So that is something to just consider and think about. Now, in the offseason, the Angels did decide to hire Ron Washington, and I honestly think that that was a pretty good hire for them because they needed a guy who's been around and who's seen some things and can kind of navigate this transition that the Angels are going through. And so we're going to be keeping Ron Washington under contract for at least this season, and we will see how it goes after that. He's given us pretty solid attribute upgrades, though, to contact and field vision, so he's pretty solid overall. Again, a guy that's been around for a while. He's only under 2-year deal, so I think as we go through this transition, having a leader like Ron Washington will be good for the clubhouse and for the young guys, but we'll see. If the team is completely cratering, maybe we have to let him go. But I do think that that was overall a decent hire for the Angels and a guy that we'll probably keep around. So I guess let's just see what this would look like. And when you start to look at some of these trades, you start to talk yourself into this pretty quickly. Now, again, I will not do any trade for Mike Trout that I do not think is as realistic as humanly possible. I will not trade Mike Trout for Jackson Holliday, Felix Bautista, and Kobe Mayo. That's not a trade that I personally would do because I think that that is a lot for Trout. Now, we are talking about Mike Trout here. We're talking about one of the best players in the league, one of the best players in the game, one of the best of all time. So I'm not going to just short sell it for nothing either, but I am going to have to try to do a trade that I think is realistic. And so if we decide to go this route, it's going to be something that's going to be talked about in the comments. Hopefully you guys give your suggestions on trades, and we're going to try and do something that is realistic and makes sense for everybody. But we're not going to do anything today, as I said. We're just getting an idea of what's out there. And obviously there's going to be a lot out there. We're probably going to get pretty much the best prospects that teams can offer, which is not surprising. See, the Marlins are able to, they're giving us basically their whole core. And I expect a lot of teams will probably offer us the same for Mike Trout. And look at this, the Pirates are offering us Paul Skeens. I don't even think the game knows how to properly evaluate Mike Trout. You can see there's a lot of teams that aren't even offering us anything because they don't even have the prospects to send an offer. So it's going to be really fascinating because a team like, I don't know, let's take a team like the Pirates, for example. Obviously, it'd be awesome to get Paul Skeens. I would not do this trade, but it'd be really fun to get him. But the Pirates, I don't think, are going to be a team that's in the Mike Trout sweepstakes. And so it's going to be really interesting to navigate it. I think the Orioles are a good example of a team with a good enough farm system that it would make sense. But would it make sense for the Orioles? It's just going to be fascinating to see what we do with Trout. But it is interesting to kind of take a look at his preseason trade value so that way we can get an idea of maybe where it's at throughout the course of this season and maybe beyond as well, depending on what route we decide to go. But this series is not all about Mike Trout. It is a lot about Mike Trout right now because we have to decide what we're going to do with him. But it's about a lot more than that. This is about a team that has failed their fans to deliver them a team that they can cheer on and be proud to be a fan of for a decade despite having the two best players in baseball and two of the best players the game has ever seen. We have to completely uproot how the Angels have built this team from the ground up. My plan with this franchise is to build this team initially through the draft. Hopefully we can hit on some of the picks that we have. And honestly, to flip a lot of these veteran guys who are playing well for more prospects and to build it up that way. We do have a team where we have a decent budget, but this team has proven time and time again that just because you have a decent budget doesn't mean anything, honestly. They've been willing to sign players, and it hasn't worked out really for them once. And so why would we continue to do that? That's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It's going to be the same thing. And so we're not going to go big in free agency unless it's a guy that we think maybe can give us multiple solid years. If not, then we're just not really going to be interested in signing him. This team has to be done right. We have to be patient. It's going to be hard. We're going to have some hard decisions to make even outside of Mike Trout. There's going to be seasons where it's going to be really tough because we're probably going to stink, but there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, and there will be hope and promise through the young players that we draft, that we trade for, that we sign. And so I am really excited for that. And I'm excited about the prospect of building this Angels team differently than they have ever done it before, how these fans have ever seen it before, and hopefully you guys are excited as well. Now, it was a really tough decision. You guys left some great comments and some great suggestions on my last video about what team I should do. I considered the Cardinals, I considered the Mariners, I considered the Padres, I considered the Giants, as well as all 7 teams I did in my other franchise video. But the Angels, to me, were the most interesting team because of the Trout piece, but also because after we make a decision on that, if we decide to go the trade route, there's really not much here to work with at all. I mean, if you take a look at the top prospect list, you have to go all the way down, more down to number 55 just before you get to the first Angels prospect. And then you have to go down some more, and you keep going down all the way until you realize there's actually none. I thought there was one more. So all that to say, we need more guys on this list. We need more guys who are going to be in the major leagues, making an impact for us, under our control, cheap. And then we can be aggressive because we do have the budget to do it. But I'm not going to use this budget until I think we're ready for it. We're not going to necessarily be taking a Moneyball approach to this team. We're not going to be pinching pennies, but we're also not going to be making signings that are just not going to work out for us, and they end up like this. And we have the worst contract in baseball again, and we have $30 million going to a player who doesn't want to play that could have been used for, three $10 million guys, five $6 million guys. Instead, we're paying Anthony Rendon, who has literally no desire to play the sport of baseball. Now, as far as how I'm going to do this series here on the channel, I'm going to be playing a lot of these games. Obviously, I'm not going to be playing every single game or even close to that. My plan is to, I don't know, I'm going to have to get a grasp on exactly how many games is good for a season. I think it could be similar to the NFL, where maybe it's, they play 17 regular season games. When I do Madden in the future, that's obviously what a regular season will be. Maybe we have 17 to 20 full games a season, and then we have some moments mixed in. We'll check on the minors. Maybe that's a little too many full games. I don't know. I plan to do some live streams as well with this series where, for example, maybe we'll play like this whole weekend series against Boston on a live stream or something like that. And so I'm excited about doing that, but we'll just kind of see how it goes. Again, my plan is to play at least like 15-ish full games a season, plus playing some with the minors. If our team makes minor league playoffs, playing through that, doing some player lock games, dropping in on some moments. So you guys will not miss a thing. This is going to be a very in-depth series. It's going to be very interactive, and your guys' comments are going to be a big deciding factor on some moves that we make in this series. So hopefully you guys do comment and get involved, because this is our team, this is our rebuild, and I'm excited to go through it with you guys here on the channel. And so with that, I will pose the first question that I have for the comments, which is, there are some free agents here. Now, Blake Snell has went to the Giants, and so he has been updated in the game to their roster. But there are still some guys here who I think could make an impact on our team, and quite honestly, could be good trade chips at the trade deadline if we sign them to one-year deals and then we flip them. And so what do you guys think about that idea? JD Martinez is a guy who could, pretty much is DH for us, but he was great last year on the Dodgers. We know he's going to hit home runs and score runs. We could put him in like our 4 spot, really boost up his numbers, and then flip him. Jordan Montgomery was, I thought, very solid last year when he was flipped to the Rangers at the trade deadline. Could we sign him? He's 31 years old, so I don't know if necessarily he's a guy that I would consider part of a long-term future, but he is a guy that we could sign for this year. And again, maybe we could sign him and then trade him closer to the trade deadline. He's at a sub-4 ERA the past 3 years, and his whip is really good as well. He's a really solid pitcher. And maybe a guy like Jordan Montgomery is a guy that we try to lock up for 2 to 3 years right now. Maybe the market is kind of undervaluing him a little bit. That's possible. So there are some free agents here. I mean, there's some guys that I like. I like Michael A. Taylor. I've always been a fan of him in the outfield. Michael Lorenzen, I actually like quite a bit. He's been on the Angels before. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Should we try to sign any of these guys? If we do, should we try and sign them with the idea that we're going to do one-year deals and then trade them at the trade deadline? Or should we sign them to see if maybe we can be a 500-ish team, and maybe that'll make Mike Trout happy this year? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about the free agents. So opening day for the 2024 season for us will be against the Baltimore Orioles. Actually, my favorite team in real life, which is coincidental but pretty cool nonetheless. And it's actually pretty interesting that this is our first team, because the Orioles a couple years ago had to make the decision to trade Manny Machado. Now, this was because they couldn't afford him, but they traded him to the Dodgers, got some honestly pretty mid prospects back. But then they began to build through the draft and build that young team up, and they're working on a much more tight budget than we are. But now you look at the Orioles and how many young, awesome players that they have. Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday, Kobe Mayo. They have probably the best farm system in baseball right now. And then they made the move for Corbin Burns. And now I think you're going to see maybe the Orioles be a little bit more aggressive. I want to kind of follow that a little bit. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to trade Trout. Doesn't also necessarily mean we have to lose 100 games like the Orioles did for multiple years. But the way that they built it with the young guys, slowly being patient, then having them all kind of come up at once, and then maybe adding some of those veterans or having a few that were there during the rebuild years get rewarded with having some pretty good teams. I just think that they did it the right way. Where they're at right now is where they were at when they had to make that Machado trade and kind of move on from that old core and had terrible contracts, is kind of where we are right now. They had the Chris Davis contract. We have the Anthony Rendon contract. They decided to just cut ties with Chris Davis. We probably are going to do the same with Anthony Rendon. So not necessarily similar teams or similar budgets, but similar circumstances and situations. And so now you see the Orioles, they've come out on the other side of it. We may have to do the same. And I think it's interesting that that is going to be the team who we go up against on opening day. So the opening day video will be released sometime as soon as possible. It will be sometime this week. It will probably be either Thursday or Friday, so be on the lookout for that. And then this series will be uploaded regularly, every other day, every third day, throughout the course of the year. I want to get through as many seasons as possible with this franchise and just see how far we can take it. Can we finally get the Angels back to the playoffs? That is goal number one. Once we get there, then we'll start talking about other things. But we have to start with just a playoff bid. I mean, God, the Angels haven't been in the playoffs in 10 years. Can we at least do that first? This fan base has went through enough. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. If you guys are excited for this, if you're going to enjoy this series, please let me know in the comment section below. Also, again, let me know about the free agents. If you think there's any that we should sign, hit that like button. It's always appreciated, all of the support. I will see you guys for a very exciting opening day in Baltimore a little bit later this week.